Welcome back to my book review series where I read books that come off of my massive Harlequin bookshelf. You might be thinking, Danny, it's been over a month since the last book review. What happened? And honestly, I'll be totally honest. Zombie Moon, the last one I read, just completely drained me. It took all of my strength right out of me. Like the 1-2 punch of Moon over Montana and then Zombie Moon, just like within a couple weeks between reading each book, just knocked me right out. And I kept picking up this book, the one that I've been reading for this week, and then putting it back down, and then picking it up, and then putting it back down again. Not through any fault of this book, just like I was mentally worn out. Anyway, the book that I picked up and did eventually finish is called Butterfly Swords by Jeannie Lin. Jeannie Lin is an author of historical romances that are actually usually set in like ancient China. It looks like she has quite a few books in this kind of series. This series or some other series that she does. It looks like there's like a steampunk series or something. It's pretty cool. These books actually they've been recommended by other authors and reviewers that I know as being pretty good. So I was looking forward to reading this one for once. So this book opens in 750 AD in China in the Tang Dynasty, and it kind of has like an alternate history thing going on. If you go to Jeannie Lin's website, there's actually a page called History and Alternative History, and it kind of goes over like the mindset behind these books. So it says, I loved reading about alternative history behind Meldrine Brooks' Iron Sea series, which by the way I have read, and they're pretty good. They're like a steampunk European history book. They're good. Iron Duke, super good. Um, Anyways, she describes real history of the Mongolian Khans and their contact with the West via Marco Polo, etc., etc. I thought it would be good to write up the alternative history of Butterfly Swords and the Dragon and the Pearl. My world isn't as Imagineered as a full-on fantasy novel. In fact, I was adamant in the fact that they are set in the Tang Dynasty in China, not a fantasy world based on the oriental trappings of China. I strive to try to be as authentic as possible in terms of culture, social climate, and political structure. I didn't want to make up place names and customs and hide behind the fact that I made things up if they seemed inauthentic. If it didn't work, it's because I didn't sell it, not because it was meant to be fabricated in any way. But one of the big leaps that I made that is not done too often in traditional historical romances is I altered the macro history of my setting. Often, authors will create imaginary kingdoms to satisfy the need to create wars and political conflict, but I already had decided that this would not be my made up kingdom. So here's the real history and my alternate history juxtaposed. In the real Tang dynasty, the rule of Emperor Xuanzong, named Li Longji, is often considered the pinnacle of the Tang dynasty. You are going to have to excuse my Chinese names. I don't know how to say them. I'm going to try my best. Near the end of his reign, the empire began to decline through different factors, including famine and several devastating military losses, costing Xuanzong several of the empire's tributary nations. Throughout the dynasty, military warlords called Jiedushi were tasked with leading campaigns against neighboring kingdoms and maintaining order at the frontier. The Jiedushi took over the military rule of their provinces, forming armies that were independent from the central imperial army. It was the combination of this military and the decentralization and the financial weakening of the central government that allowed the first strike in the beginning of the fall of the Golden Age. The most popular telling has Emperor Xuanzong declining into decadence and extravagance in his elder years. He became smitten by one of his concubines, Lady Yang Yuhan, who is more commonly known as Yang Guifei. Under her thrall, he ignored matters of state, appointed her relatives and other corrupt men to important governmental positions, and spent his days throwing lavish banquets for his consort. One of the men who gained the favor of the corrupt court was a warlord by the name of An Lushan, who was of Sogdian, the ancient Persian Empire, descent rather than pure Chinese. During the Tang Dynasty, the population of the empire was a mix of ethnicities, much like the Roman Empire during its height. And Lushan gained prominence defending the northeastern border against the Khitans and between he and his sons controlled several military districts and a sizable army. One of the downfalls of the military system was that too many men were elevated to governorships from lowly field positions. As a result, the imperial government had to contend with and try to balance the demands of many powerful factions within its own borders. In 755, An Lushan held the Anshi rebellion against Xuanzang, forcing the emperor to flee from the capital. During the tragic flight, the emperor's army refused to continue unless he executed his beloved Yang Guifei, blaming her and her inept cousin, Chancellor Yang Guozong, for the downfall of the imperial government. The emperor had her strangled, and her body was buried by the roadside while the escort continued on to Chengdu in the south. An Lushan took over control of the dual capitals of Chang'an and Luoyang and declared himself emperor. Meanwhile, Xuanzang set up a separate court in the south, but he was a broken man. He recognized his son Li Heng's ascension to the throne and took the title of a retired emperor. The son mounted a campaign against An Lushan to try and recapture the capital and destroy the warlord's forces, though it would take the reign of 3 Tang emperors before the rebellion was crushed in 763 AD. The Tang dynasty continues for over another century, finally ending in 907 AD, although it never reaches the height of Xuanzang's rule again. In Jeannie Lin's Tang dynasty, Butterfly Swords and the Dragon and the Pearl take place during the period of the Anshi Rebellion, although the alternative history changes the circumstances of the temporary fall of the Tang emperors. Emperor Xuanzang is replaced by a fictional Emperor Li Ming, known as the August Emperor, who has died without leaving behind a direct male heir. Instead of An Lushan, a warlord named Shen An Lu has taken control of the unrest, and Li Ming's only daughter, Mia, has abdicated the throne and lives in exile. She actually comes up in this book. Emperor Shen and his sons control the largest military force in the empire, allowing them to maintain control over the central part of the kingdom, but his rule is constantly challenged by other warlords, many who want to restore a Tang ruler to the throne. The tragic figure of Yang Yuhang was replaced by precious consort Ling Su-ying, who survives the fall of the Tang regime. Li Tao is a commoner who is given military command as a jidushi by the August Emperor. They come up in this book and in the next book. In this timeline, Emperor Shen is seen as a usurper of low birth and mixed blood, though he does rule over the central government. A clear opposition government has yet to be established, and the Jidushi are left to fight it out over who will control the empire. It was a difficult decision to alter such pivotal events in the Tang dynasty history to create this world. The intention was to be able to use a pivotal figure such as the emperors and the warlords, their consorts, and set the intentions during the tumultuous time that inspired me. I hope readers will realize that these stories are historical fantasy and not meant to be made as a historical reference. During China's infamous Tang dynasty, time awash with luxury yet littered with deadly intrigues and fallen royalty, betrayed Princess Ai Li flees before her wedding. Miles from home, with only her delicate butterfly swords for defense, she enlists the reluctant protection of a blue-eyed warrior. Battle-scarred, embittered Ryam has always held his own life at cheap value. Ai Li's innocent trust in him and honorable, stubborn nature make him desperate to want to protect her, which means not seducing the first woman he's ever truly wanted. So the book opens in 758 AD in China during the Tang Dynasty, as we've mentioned multiple times already. Ai Li is in a palanquin. I don't know. It's one of these. Like this thing here with the little cart. She's basically riding in this thing while other people are carrying her cart. And she can hear the sound of metal on metal, as though people are starting to fight with swords outside. So she starts looking for her swords, which she packed away with her inside the cart, the palanquin, as like a comfort and a reminder of her home. Like she's leaving home to go get married. She's bringing the only things like she really is super attached to, which are her pair of swords, which is cool. We already have a heroine who has swords, and she knows how to use them, and she's getting ready to fight to defend herself. I think, I already think this is a step up from the previous book, unless she suddenly turns around and gets out of this palanquin and decides, I forget how to fight completely, apparently. So the heroine, Ai Li, she emerges to find a clash of swords, but it's revealed that she's actually aware of the attack. She knew this was coming. She actually hired these mercenaries to dress up like bandits to stage an attack. And in the combat, she runs away. She gets out of the palanquin. She makes it look like she was kidnapped by these bandits, and she takes off into the woods. Once again, like, I'm reading out my narration, my inner thoughts while I'm reading the book, so I'm going to be making comments about what I think is going to happen, even though I've already read the book. So keep in mind when I say, like, I think this is what I was thinking at the time when I read the book. So the point of view switches to a man named Ryam. I think this is a flashback. He's sitting outside. It's in an open-air tavern, so it's like 4 posts and a roof. It's like a gazebo, but there's like a bunch of tables and people are eating rice and stuff. But he has no money. He is just a very large white guy living in ancient China. Because of this, people distrust him. And as far as status goes, he's only like a step above stray dogs, maybe. He watches a group of guys enter the open-air tavern, but he immediately notices that the person like in the center of this little group is actually a woman in disguise. But like while he's staring at them, the proprietor notices him and like literally just shoos him away like he's a dog. Ryam doesn't like move immediately, so the tavern keeper like grabs a big club and he like threatens to beat him with it, so he leaves. But this woman dressed like a man in the center of the group speaks up, tells him to leave the man alone, and then actually gives Ryam their rice because they'd ordered like some rice to eat. A couple minutes later, the group get up, they leave, and then Ryam, who has eaten the rice, gets up to leave as well because the tavern keeper is like, he started yelling at him again to get out once this other person is gone. He doesn't get very far though, because he starts to feel kind of sick and drowsy, and he realizes like almost immediately that he's been poisoned. His first instinct is that the woman dressed like a man who had given him the rice had actually poisoned him, but that doesn't really make a ton of sense, and he quickly deduces that the poison was meant for her. He doesn't know who could have done it because she was surrounded by bodyguards, but that's probably the best guess, and I'm glad he at least jumped to that conclusion very quickly. I'm used to the last book where like really stupid stuff would happen and other people would be like, why? Despite the poison, Ryam turns around and rushes in the direction of where the woman had disappeared. The poison had been meant to make her groggy and knock him out, and so he suspects like she was gonna be kidnapped or something. It's not like a poison to kill, but it's a poison to knock out. As he runs, he hears the clash of swords, and he sees her and her guards surrounded by a dozen bandits. She's standing in the middle holding her 2 swords, and he rushes in to take out one of the attackers who's coming after her. When he turns around, to look at her and declare that he's a friend, she kicks him in the nuts and then tries to stab him. He manages to parry the blow and keeps like insisting that he's here to help. Well, her guards around her are all starting to collapse because they've all been drugged. The woman turns, and she seems to be giving him a chance because she starts to fight with one of the other attackers. Ryam can feel the poison is, like, working through his system. It's gonna take him out. And there's too many bandits here for them to fend off just the 2 of them, so they start running off together into the field. He can only get so far before he collapses, but they do get far enough away where the bandits don't find them. Ai Li tries to shake the man's shoulders to wake him up, but he's completely out of it. He's out like a light. In her narration, it says that she prayed these men weren't here to take her back to Li Tao. And we're not totally sure who that is yet, but we're definitely going to get some exposition on that later. Ai Li looks down at the man and reflects that his fair skin and sandy hair had startled her, and that she had originally wanted to flee from him like a superstitious peasant. Like, that's a quote from the book. But he was no ghost or demon, just a man, a wild-looking, possibly crazed man who had saved her. When Ryam starts to wake up, Ai Li asks him who he is and why he would bother to jump in and save her, because she's a total stranger. And he kind of struggles to understand her Chinese. She gives him some water, and he asks her why she stayed with him when he was unconscious in the field. Ai Li says that she owes him a debt, and Ryam answers that to see you is payment enough. Ai Li is confused because she's still dressed as a dude, and she's still pretending to be a dude, and she thinks he doesn't know that she's disguised, but she asks him where he learned to speak, because it sounds like he learned how to speak their language in a brothel. Like, so it's very lowbrow, very low class sounding accent. And he laughs, and he's just like, yeah, I can't deny that. Instead, she offers to speak his language for him, and she says that her father is a merchant, which is why she happens to know his language. It doesn't actually say what his language is at any point in this book, I don't think. So Ryam introduces himself, and she asks what his name means, but he just says it doesn't mean anything at all. He doesn't mention like his surname. He doesn't mention his family name at all, which it's kind of like a custom to give your family name, like especially in countries like this. It's definitely impolite to not. I was thinking there's gonna be some kind of like big name reveal later. Maybe he's like a super important person, and that's why he's not giving out his last name. Ai Li introduces herself as Li, family name Cheng. So Cheng Li is basically what she introduces herself as, and she says that Ryam can call her brother Li. Ryam immediately points out that she's a woman, and he's not going to harm her, and he even reminds her that she kicked him in the nuts when he had tried to run in and save her. So she introduces herself as Cheng Ai Li. So Ai Li Cheng, if you were to flip it around, basically. Ryam says that Ai Li is a pretty name. The book spells it... So from this point on, the book starts to spell it Ailey, like Eiley, like just an Americanized name. And it does that like not just when Ryam is saying the name out loud, it does it in the narration too, and it does it when it's coming from her point of view. I think from this point on, it only kind of goes back to Eiley when other people are saying her name. So I'm gonna say Eiley, I'm gonna say it like that, because that's how the narration in the book is writing it out, Eiley. She asks what a foreigner is doing so far into the Empire, and he counters by asking her what a woman is doing traveling around with a group of men. She doesn't answer his question either, so they both ignore it. And she just stands up and says, I see you're not hurt. All right, farewell. And she's gonna go walk off on her own. Ryam jumps up to his feet and asks her where she thinks she's going, and Eiley says she's going to go find her bodyguards because they're gonna be looking for her. Ryam points out that the rice had been poisoned, and it had been meant for her. So someone had betrayed her, and he suspects it must have been one of her guards. Ryam insists that she should wait here with him, because they're probably still searching, but it is starting to get dark. It's getting late. It's nearly sundown, he said, glancing at the sky. You'd better stay here in case any of that scum is still about. Stay the night here with him and no one around for miles? Her heart thudded as if trying to escape the tight cloth bound around her breasts. He had rescued her. She should have nothing to fear from him, but there was something dangerous in him, primal and masculine. Yang. He stood too close, close enough for her to catch his scent, an enticing mix of leather and the autumn smell of the woods that invited her to tempt fate. She couldn't let her guard down. With a steadying breath, she stepped back. How can I be sure it's safe here? You don't want to face those smugglers alone. He regarded her with a half smile. Unless you intend to fight all of them with those knives of yours. They are not knives. These are butterfly swords. She shoved her second blade away. Yeah, title drop. Eiley has to come up with a plan, because Li Tao is clearly scheming, and she knows he's probably behind this attack. She looks at Ryam and seems to devise some kind of plan, and says she has a sense of Yuan Fen about the swordsman. I looked up what Yuan Fen is on Wikia, and it says that it is a fateful coincidence, a concept in Chinese society describing good and bad chances and potential relationships. It can be translated to destiny, luck as coordinated by one's past, or natural affinity among friends. It is comparable to the concept of karma in Buddhism, but Yuan Fen is interactive rather than individual. The driving forces and causes behind Yuan Fen are said to be actions done in previous incarnations. Eiley has decided to stay the night with his protection, so she compliments him on how he was able to fight while he was still drugged and barely struggling to stand. She tells him that she needs to be escorted home to Chang'an, the capital. It's a week away from where they are. So she needs to get home. And she's expecting Ryam to take her, basically. It's a week away from where they are. Eiley basically throws a silk purse at Ryam, and it's full of money, and he just immediately throws it back at her, and he says he can't go to Chang'an. Ailey says, I beseech you as a fellow swordsman, and Ryam is like, you're not a fellow swordsman at all. You're not a man. And Ryam asks her what she was doing so far away from home, and Ailey says that she was helping her family business selling tea. Ryam points out that no merchant would send his daughter out here all alone to sell tea, and she says, well, I wasn't alone, I had bodyguards. Ryam says he can't take her to Chang'an, because if he returns to the city, he'll be hanged. Ailey asks him if he's killed somebody or if he stole something, and he says no. Ryam thinks that he never should have taken that command, and that he had never been fit to lead. So it doesn't actually say what he was doing, just that he had taken a command, and that he shouldn't have. Ryam says he'll take her to the nearest town, and then from there, she can find somebody else to take her to the city. Ryam says he wants to help, but he's just not the right person to do it. So Ailey says that she knows he's a good person. Ryam just counters with, no, I'm not. He is basically been, he's basically been staring at her body this entire time. Like, she's in boy clothes, and he's still hard up for her, even just like this. He's not gonna do anything about it though. Instead, he's just like trying to change the subject, and he asks her instead where she learned to fight with her swords. Ailey says she has 5 brothers, and when he asks where they all are, Ailey answers that they've just all been scattered to all corners of the empire. Ryam says that he can't believe there's nobody else she could call for help, but Ailey says that she's completely alone. The pair of them are getting ready to rest for the night, and Ryam draws his sword with the intent to lay it between them, I guess so that he can grab it quickly if, like, they get jumped in the middle of the night or something. Ailey asks if she can see it, so he hands the blade over. She says that it's heavy, and he says that it was his father's sword, but then he suddenly gets, like, really self-conscious about it, and he takes the sword and puts it back down on the ground, and that's it. That's the really awkward end of the conversation. He takes his cloak and he drapes it over Ailey's shoulders, and he says the next town's not very far. He's just been there, and they had chased him away with shovels and axes, so he's not really welcome back there, but there's somebody there who could probably help her. Ryam says there's something I should tell you before telling Ailey that she can't lie, like she's a shitty liar. Ailey says she doesn't lie, and he points out that a merchant wouldn't have 5 sons. She has to be nobility, and she's probably a warrior class, considering she fights with swords. And with that, they just go to sleep. Ailey wakes up, and she's miserable because she's been sleeping on the ground. And she thinks about how she basically spent like the last week being carried around by servants in her palanquin. So the opening scene was not a flashback. It was like a jump in time. A little bit anyway. She was in the palanquin. She got quote-unquote kidnapped. And then sometime later, she was going to the inn with some new bodyguards when she got poisoned, is I think what was happening. Ailey reflects that it was better waking up on the ground than it would be shackled to Li Tao's wedding bed. So she definitely arranged her own kidnapping to escape Li Tao before they could be married, because they were in an arranged marriage, apparently. It still hasn't really been elaborated on yet, but we'll get to this eventually. Before she had run away from the palanquin, she had mentioned in her narration that old Wu, the man she trusted from her guards whom she had known for years, had apparently told her a secret just days before, but it doesn't say what the secret is yet. Ryam is still sleeping, but Ailey is restless, so she picks up her swords and kind of wanders out a little bit. She goes into the field to start swinging them around. It's exposition time. Ailey thinks of home, and she thinks of her brothers and her parents, and her grandmother, who would have been correcting her on her sword swings. She reflects that she had always been excited to leave home and get married, but old Wu had told her just a few days before she had escaped that her brother Ming Han had died, and it was not an accident. Li Tao was the man who had killed him. Ryam interrupts the exposition time and asks what she's doing, because he's been watching her while she's been training. She explains that she's doing her first sword form, which feels like it's kind of like a meditation for her. Like, this is how she kind of centers herself, catches her breath, thinks and meditates, you know. Ryam asks if her brothers taught her how to do this, and she says that her grandmother was the one who had trained her. Her grandmother was apparently a master. Ryam asks her if she wants to duel, and there's like a back and forth conversation between them, and there's definitely some innuendo about the whole thing. This entire sword fighting duel that's happening. Eileen says that she wants to take 10 swings first, and then Ryam can only defend because there's such a big size difference between them. It's not fair if they just one-on-one start immediately because he's huge. He's like a 6-foot tall dude, and she's like a small Chinese lady. Ryam asks her if they can make a wager. If he wins, he wants a kiss. Eileen says that if she wins, she wants him to take her to Chang'an. So he agrees. Eileen says that if he can't win in 10 turns, then they're going to consider it a loss. Really, Ryam is getting the short end of the stick here. They're going to exchange 20 blows, and she gets the first 10. He can only defend. And somebody wins if they draw first blood, or the rounds go for 20 turns without him besting her. They separate, they take their stances, and it's kind of like a flip switch with Eileen. She's graceful and strong, and Ryam can only really defend himself. Like, even if that wasn't the rule, he is like struggling to hold her off. She's fast. He says, "I can't take you to Chang'an if you kill me," because like she's really going for it. Basically, she almost cuts him on the neck, and at 10 hits, she stops, and he expects her to just switch to going onto the defensive. However, she absolutely doesn't do that, and she immediately goes back in and starts fighting him again. But he's bigger and he's stronger, and he backs her up against a tree, forcing her to drop her swords. Ultimately, Ryam wins, and she owed him a kiss, and Eileen just stands like perfectly still, eyes closed, waiting for him to kiss her. And Ryam is like, nope, the deal was you have to kiss me. She kisses him once. It's like super chaste, just eyes closed, light peck on the lips. Nothing happens. But nothing happens, and she kind of can't resist, so she goes in for another kiss, and then that's when Ryam grabs her, and they're just like full on making out. But then they pull apart, and Ryam is just like, you sure do honor your deals. And he picks up her swords and he hands them back to her. And there's definitely some tension between them, but they get up onto the road. But the nearest town is like hours away. They're walking together for an hour, trying to make conversation. And they're both like definitely trying not to think about that kiss. But they're both very distracted for obvious reasons. Eileen explains that she learned to fight with her swords when she'd been a little girl. She had trained with her brothers and the other soldiers before they all started actually treating her like a girl, and then, like, once she kind of became a girl in their eyes, they didn't take her seriously anymore. Eileen tries to talk to Ryam about where he learned how to fight, and if his father was the one who taught him. But his father is definitely, like, a very sore subject for him, and it ends with Ryam announcing that his dad's dead, and he doesn't want to talk about it anymore. Apparently, he had been a wandering mercenary. It doesn't fully explain in his narration yet what's going on with his side. Once the town is in view, Eileen says she'll go on from here, but Ryam keeps following after her, even though he said he didn't want to help her in the first place. Now he's like, I can't leave you alone after I saved you, and they go into the city together. Ryam asks her who she's hiding from because she says she can't even go to the officials for help to get home. Eileen just tells him that there's a man plotting against her father, and that's it. Eventually, they settle on getting a horse, and she can ride to Chang'an. And Eileen heads into a stable and purchases 2 horses, one for Ryam, so he can go home on his own way in the morning. A debt repaid for helping her get this far. First, they have to rest for the night, and the horses won't be ready till morning, and it's starting to get late. As they're leaving, they round the corner and find a courier reading a proclamation from Li Tao. Eileen rushes away, and Ryam demands to know what's going on and why they're running from Li Tao. Eileen says that she was actually betrothed to him, and that they had been about to get married. Eileen hears the soldiers barking to like search the streets. They're looking for her now. And they have to hide, so she and Ryam take off running, and they actually end up going into a second-floor storeroom behind some old herbs. They hide like behind some pots and stuff. Ryam then demands to know the actual truth and what he's getting into. Eileen admits that she had had an arranged marriage to Li Tao, but during the marriage procession, she had discovered that he was plotting to betray her father. She hired mercenaries to interrupt and make it look like she had been kidnapped, which is when she made her escape. Ryam muses that Li Tao must be a powerful man to have people scouring the countryside for her, and Eileen says that he is the Jiadushi of this province. the military governor. He has control over all the armies and laws in the area, which is why Ai Li can't go to anyone else for help. If she's caught by Li Tao, he will force her to marry him. And Ryam, if he's caught, he will be hung for kidnapping the governor's intended wife. It's getting late, and the soldiers are still patrolling the streets, so they have to wait until morning to leave. So the best course of action for them is to find a better spot to hide and sneak out of this storeroom, because this is not a good spot to hide. They huddle together for a few more minutes. Things get kind of quiet, and they both kind of get caught up thinking about that kiss from earlier, and they just like they separate really quickly before they can actually do anything, because they're both like, nope, this is not the time, we don't need to do this right now. And Ryam just goes to like look out the window just to put space between them. Ryam asks Ai Li if she's sure that she wants to do this, and Ai Li announces that she would rather die than be married to Li Tao. They leave the storehouse without getting caught by anyone and move on down the streets together. While they walk, Ai Li goes back to asking Ryam about his own past and where he comes from, like who they were, and his answers are super duper short. He doesn't like talking about who he is or where he came from. He says he comes from the opposite side of the world and that he has been in China for years and years. Ai Li asks if he's part of the Lost Legion, which was a group of soldiers who had marched on Chang'an during a rebellion. Ryam says maybe the less they know about each other, the better. He wants to get her to Chang'an, and he needs to disappear after. At the end of the alley, they see a post. Somebody has stuck like a poster on the wall. It's a proclamation, and Ryam asks what it says. Ai Li realizes that he can't read the characters. He can't read the Chinese characters. And she's glad, because she doesn't want him to know who she really is. She says that Li Tao is offering 100 taels of silver for her return. And Ryam simply says he must be rich as the emperor. Ryam gets them into a brothel where they rent a room to sleep for the night, because it's the sort of place where they wouldn't want guards even if it was for the reward on Ai Li's head. Come morning, they head to the stable, and it's crawling with guards, so they have to figure something else out. The guards are obviously still hunting for her, so when they spot a carriage being loaded up with earthen jugs, so like clay pots and stuff, they decide the best course of action would be to sneak into the back and ride out of the city that way. Ryam tells Ai Li to go first, and he'll follow after her, and she sneaks off to climb into the back, which it goes off successfully without a hitch. A few minutes later, Ryam pops inside as well, and they just ride off in the back of the carriage. The carriage is actually riding off to the south though, and they need to head north. So once they're out of the city and there's enough space, they jump out of the moving cart and land in the grass. And Ai Li gets all scraped up, but she's fine. Ryam had told her before they jumped that the grass would break her fall, and Ai Li kind of gives him shit because it definitely did not. He calls her a tough girl, and she says she has 5 brothers, but corrects herself to say that she has 4 brothers. There's a moment where Ryam is looking over her scrapes and bruises, and they're really close, and they almost kiss again, but nothing happens, and they get up and start heading northward to the capital, so that she can get back to her parents. Her father would think that she's married to Li Tao by now, and that they would have his military force against their enemies, but Ai Li thinks that Li Tao was their enemy all along. They head into the forest because it would provide them with cover for search parties and to be off of the main road, because they don't want to be caught by wandering soldiers. As long as they follow the river northward, it'll lead them back to Chang'an. Ai Li talks about the trees a bit, because they're ancient and massive, and she said that her grandmother had learned her sword mastery down in the south, which is where they are now. Ai Li says her mother had always disapproved of her using swords, and that she was so happy when the marriage was arranged. Ryam asks her why she ran away then, and Ai Li tells him that Li Tao is a powerful and ruthless guy, and Ryam adds that he must have an army of thousands at his disposal. He does not seem like the type of man who would take refusal lightly. Ai Li is quick to defend that she isn't refusing him because he's fat or ugly or old, and Ryam goes, well, is he though? And Ai Li says she doesn't know, because she's never seen his face. It was an arranged marriage. He hasn't seen her either. Ryam is like, oh, that makes sense. If it's an arranged marriage, of course you have doubts about it. And Ai Li says, well, that's not it at all. In her culture, it would be a huge dishonor for her to reject a marriage based on her husband's appearance or age. Ai Li says that she trusts her family to make her a good match. Ryam is like, yeah, but what if he's ancient? And Ai Li admits that her mother had told her that he was twice her age. Ryam asks how old she is, and she says that she's 19. During this entire conversation, they're walking together through the woods. Ryam is like internally going, she could marry me though. Could be me though. but he's not gonna say anything about it out loud. There's points where like he does ask her like, "Wouldn't you prefer a strong, handsome man who gets your heart racing?" And Eileen's like, "No, no, not really." Ryam points out that she says she would marry this guy no matter how old or ugly he was because that's what she's supposed to do. So he asks her then like why she took off. And Eileen explains that there's been unrest in the country and that her fourth oldest brother had been sent down to the lands that bordered Li Tao's to assist with the military forces. There was an ambush and he was killed. However, one of Li Tao's soldiers broke away and found her and told her that had been killed by Li Tao's men. Ryam internally thinks that she was too quick to trust, but Eileen says that the man who came to her was formerly a dragon guard and was committed to saving her. Ryam thinks about her bodyguards, who had also betrayed her with the poison earlier, and he still thinks like she's trusting these people way too easily. Just like she's trusting him, a total stranger, to get her across the country to go home. In Ryam's narration, he thinks about how he's definitely not fit for the political intrigue that comes with these sorts of things, like just being so close to the royal family. He had shown up in a mercenary band that had been caught in a rebellion, and then afterwards, the Emperor had allowed him and his people to settle in the west. A month ago, however, he had come down with a band of 20 men to deliver a precious shipment, but his group had been attacked. He had been knocked out, and when he came to, all of his men were gone. They walk all morning through the woods, and Eileen is feeling a bit better. The woods are a natural protection, and she's not afraid of being found in here. As they pass the stream, she notices fish, and they both stop to look into the water, and she realizes that she's just a fucking mess. Her braid is coming undone, she's covered in dirt, and Ryam is like, well, I'll catch us some fish. And when she asks him how he's going to be doing it, considering he has no supplies, he just like holds up his hands. And she's like, I don't think you can catch fish that way. And he goes like, just watch me. And Ryam takes off his boots and his vest and he steps into the water and she's just staring at him, but she's trying hard not to stare too much. But like, he took off his vest and his shirt's all wet, so she's definitely staring. He splashes her with the water and she starts like yelling, and then Ryam is like, stop, you're scaring the fish. But like, he splashed her first. Eileen moves out of his splash range so he can't throw more water at her. And then she just like watches as he starts pouncing around in the water trying to grab fish with his bare hands, but he's doing a real shit job at it. And she's like laughing at him the entire time. She asks him if he's ever been able to catch fish this way, and Ryam is like, yeah, I totally do this when I get really hungry. And Eileen is like, well, no wonder you were starving when we met. She's sitting there redoing her braids when Ryam finally catches a fish and throws it up onto the bank. They're just one fish though, so they're gonna have to share it. When he gets out of the water, he takes his shirt off, and Eileen is like, God, this guy's so hot though. And Eileen is like, you should put your wet shirt back on because you're gonna get sick. And Ryam points out that it's a sunny day, but he puts his shirt back on anyway. So he's like, you gotta cover up, you're too hot. Ryam starts a fire, and Eileen says he should show her how to do stuff like that, like starting fires, catching fish, things like that. But Ryam points out that she'll be home soon enough, and she won't need to worry about catching fish anymore. As they sit to eat, she asks him about where he's from, again, and he tells her about where his people have settled. She clarifies that she wants to know of where he came from before he came here. He tells her that it's very different there. She keeps asking him questions, and he mentions his father again, and Ryam starts getting super defensive and asks her why she cares. He immediately feels some kind of bad about snapping at her, so he tells her that his life before coming here wasn't very interesting, and asks her what she wants to know. She asks him about a scar he has over his ear, and he says he got into a fight with Imperial soldiers. Ryam questions if she's having second thoughts about being here with him, and Eileen says she trusts him. She was the one who asked him for help, after all. All the while, Ryam has been kind of inching closer to her, and by the end of the conversation, he's basically right in front of her. She knows what he's about to do, so when he leans down and kisses her, Eileen's totally ready for it, and they're immediately full on, like, making out again. Ryam is like, she's gonna stop me, so I'm gonna enjoy this while I can, but Eileen does not stop him right away. He's putting his hands under her shirt, and then she's like, okay, stop. And then she says, well, this can't happen. And Ryam goes, I know. And Eileen goes like, never with you. Which is like, ouch, I guess. Kind of rude. She storms off, and Ryam follows after her, and they're both basically silent and stomping through the woods for like an hour before Ryam just goes like, we were lost in our heads of it, that's all. And Eileen's like, you probably kissed hundreds of girls like that anyway. And Ryam just goes, more than I can even remember. Eileen tells him to swear that he won't do anything like that again. And he's just like, okay, fine, but then don't kiss me back next time. Eileen pulls out her swords and she tells him to pull his out too, and she's gonna fight him right here, right now. But before they do that, they get interrupted by the sound of someone chopping wood. It could be a nearby village, so she puts her swords away and they both start sneaking towards the noise. They see some guys cutting down bamboo to make baskets, and Eileen comes out of the woods to talk to them. Ryam is standing there acting like her bodyguard, and nobody trusts him, but they'll talk to Eileen well enough anyway. She leads them into the village, and they find an older man, like, sitting around outside. They ask him if they would be able to stay somewhere for the night. They can pay for the space. But when she goes to find her coin purse, she realizes it's gone. That it was probably lost when they jumped from the carriage earlier, and now they're a week away from the city with no money at all. But the old man gives them some baskets and says they can stay in the boathouse if they pick his vegetables for him. So they take their baskets and they get to work. Eileen is still barely talking to Ryam because she's still pissed about the entire kiss situation, but Ryam is like, it's fine, nothing happened. Eileen ignores him, and he says he's sorry, but he says it in Chinese this time. And she tells him his accent isn't that bad. Eileen asks him if he has to apologize often, and Ryam's response is that he's well versed in that one, and that he also knows how to say, you're pretty, and also, you're pretty when you're angry. And Eileen says she's not angry. He says he's glad because she's the last person he wants to turn her swords on him. Eileen then throws a yam at him, but she's like definitely feeling a little bit better now that they've had their I'm sorries. Ryam says he realizes that she's far above him, and she's basically nobility, and he's nothing. Eileen says that that's not what she'd meant, but she also knows that when she returned home, inevitably she would be married to someone else because that was her duty. Ryam promises, he swears on his father's sword that he won't touch her again, and he says that they'll just treat each other like swordsmen from now on, and he goes to shake her hand. Eileen doesn't understand what that means, so he has to explain that it's like an oath, like from one swordsman to another. They finish picking the yams, and they're shown into the boathouse. The farmer brings them some boiled yams and a threadbare blanket, so he's like cooked up the yams that they've picked, basically. And they settle in for the night with this one blanket. And Ryam asks her if she grew up in the capital, and she explains that they grew up in the northwest. That she had moved to the capital after her father got promoted. And at this point, I'm wondering if like her father is the emperor or something. Maybe a super close advisor. The story is not mentioning who he really is for a reason. So it's gonna be some kind of big reveal later, surely. Eileen says she misses her life in the mountains where she grew up because people could be trusted up there, but they can't be down here, closer to the capital. Ryam thinks that her father must be an advisor to the new Emperor Shen. So now I'm pretty sure that Eileen's gonna turn out to be the Emperor's daughter or something. There's been turmoil since the new Emperor took over and infighting between the generals. Ryam still thinks he must be a general or an advisor. Ryam says people have no allegiance to anyone but the Emperor, and Eileen says... Ryam says his people have no allegiance to anyone but the Emperor, so Eileen has nothing to worry about with him. His people have settled in the Gansu corridor, a place called the Jade Gate, Yumen Guan. Eileen muses that that's where the exiled princess is said to have gone, and Ryam goes, Mia? She is like a little dragon. That's what he calls her. He says she's like a little dragon. And Eileen is shocked because obviously calling a princess by her name like that is a death sentence. Ryam asks if they ever do punishments in half measures and points out that she's not a princess anymore. She married a barbarian. Eileen tries to apologize for what she said earlier when they kissed, and it had nothing to do with Ryam being inferior. Ryam is just, you gotta be tired, go to bed. And tries to just end it like that, just like, stop, go to bed. He says he'll sleep by the door to keep watch. As they're getting ready to settle in, Eileen says she has to ask, why was his band attacked by Imperial soldiers? And Ryam explains that their shipment had been searched, and that it had been found to contain swords, which were illegal cargo. They hadn't been there when they'd first searched the cargo, like when they'd first picked it up, there'd been no swords in it, so somebody had put it in there. And Eileen says that they must have been betrayed. Ryam says he tried to talk them out of the conflict with the soldiers, but it hadn't worked and the rest of his band got killed. On that somber note, they go to bed. Eileen inside the shed and Ryam sitting outside. In the morning, Eileen leaves the shed and spots the farmer who beckons her over. He says that he knows who she is and calls her Princess Eileen, and he says that she has to run. Some soldiers come bursting out of the forest and grab her, and she can't help or yell for Ryam. Soldiers come bursting out of the forest and grab her, and she can't yell for help, but Ryam does notice that she's missing and then spots her being grabbed by the soldiers. He runs over with his sword and cuts through them like immediately. He frees her, and then the farmer tells them to take the boat and run down the river. There's a woman down there who will help them, but they have to go now because more soldiers are coming. Eileen and Ryam take off in the boat, and they can hear soldiers in the forest like coming running out behind them. Eileen gets down, and they get away in the boat. While they're in the boat, Ryam scolds her for leaving to go talk to the farmer while he was sleeping, and he was seriously concerned she wasn't going to be able to get away from the soldiers, and he reiterates that she shouldn't just trust everybody. Eileen reminds Ryam that she trusts him, and they start talking about the scar that he has above his ear. Ryam says that he doesn't remember what happened after he was struck, and Eileen says that he was lucky to be alive. Ryam reminds her that the rest of his crew were not so lucky. They end up getting close again, and it seems like they might be about to kiss, and Ryam says, "No wonder Li Tao is willing to move mountains to get to you." And then Eileen's sad because she actually really likes Ryam, and she knows even if she doesn't marry Li Tao, she will probably be married off to some other high-ranking dude because she's a princess. Eileen says that the weapon shipments that had been intercepted might have been for Li Tao. The Emperor has taken control of all the forges to try to stem the disrest between the other nobility. So if Li Tao was trying to build an army in secret, he would be importing weapons from outside. They have to come from somewhere. He could be the source of the attack, and Ryam says that he and his people try to stay away from the affairs of the Empire. Eileen points out that the exiled princess is there, and Ryam says she's wrong about the princess. They had risked everything to rescue her from the palace, and she wanted to abdicate the throne. She wants nothing to do with the court either. A day later, they abandon the boat in the river and continue on foot, and Eileen is seriously regretting her choice to put some distance between them because she wishes Ryam would look at her like he had the last time they had gotten too close. But she doesn't say anything about it to him, and soon enough they're approaching a house on the edge of the river, but it's not just like a little shack like the last one. This is a mansion. This is a big-ass house. One of the gardeners working outside is the one who spots them, and he runs inside the house, and out comes the lady of the house. The lady is Ling Suyin, who was a consort to the former emperor. Eileen is absolutely like, we should actually just go. We don't need her help. We should just go because this person is going to know who she is like immediately. She's going to figure it out. Ryam actually sees her and greets her by name, calling her Lady Ling. Lady Ling greets him by name in return. So Eileen is like immediately super jealous, super like, I wouldn't say mad, but she's put off by the fact that like Ryam knows this lady and she knows him. They have some kind of history, and she immediately is like, oh, Ryam must be like completely enthralled by how beautiful she is. Lady Ling says Ryam is quite far from Yumen Guan. Ryam introduces Eileen to Lady Ling and says he's trying to return her to her home in Chang'an. Eileen doesn't trust this lady at all because she was in the palace when it was at its most treacherous. So like when all the turmoil was happening, all this like underhanded gossip and like rebellion and shit like that, Lady Ling was there, which is why Eileen doesn't trust her. She must be a schemer, and she doesn't want anything to do with Lady Ling, and it totally doesn't have anything to do with the fact that Ryam already knows who she is and thinks she's beautiful. Despite Eileen saying they can't stay, that they're being followed, Lady Ling insists they at least stay tonight. Eileen is set up with a private room and a hot bath, and when she's changed into the clean clothes, she opens her door and finds Ryam just standing like right outside ready to knock. He's cleaned and shaved, and Eileen is like super thrown off by this. Ryam says that Lady Ling can help her, but he calls her by her name, Su Yin, and that just makes Eileen even more jealous than she already was. He says they can trust her, and he knows her from before, and that she's going to help them. Eileen doesn't trust her at all, and she also doesn't like how Ryam looks at her. And Eiley says he walks around with his chest out like a rooster when he's around Lady Ling. Which, I mean, not fair, really. I think they've only been around her for a couple minutes, but alright. They go down to dinner with Lady Ling, but it's like really fucking awkward, and Lady Ling is staring at her like she's trying to figure out where she knows Eiley from. They mention that Ryam knows Lady Ling from saving her after the Emperor died, and the rebellion started in the palace, so they're old friends. Eiley kind of hates this whole thing, so she says she's not feeling very well and she needs to go rest. Ryam gets up to go with her, but Lady Ling insists that he stay here. They have lots to catch up on together, and super jealous, Eiley just leaves Ryam and Ling sitting together having dinner and drinking and laughing. Once Eiley is gone, the first thing that Lady Ling says to Ryam is, "She's very pretty, and I can see that you're in trouble." And she's just like teasing him. And Ryam is like, "Well, if you keep talking like that, it'll sound like you're jealous." Lady Ling responds that she can clearly see he's already taken with Eiley, but she starts asking him if he knows who she really is, because that's no merchant's daughter. That's the lie Eiley has been telling him this whole time, and she still hasn't told Ryam the truth. Lady Ling also mentions that she is loyal to the current emperor and that she just wants to leave a life of politics behind her. Ryam ends up telling her he has a plan. If Lady Ling brings Eiley back to the capital, then she won't be shunned and dishonored by her father for traveling alone with Ryam for as long as she has. Lady Ling can get her back safely to the palace without the scorn. Ryam plans on just returning to Yumengguan. Lady Ling teases him about how he's clearly restraining himself around her and how it's an unrequited love going on between the two of them. But Ryam asks again if he can trust her to get Eiley back to the capital. Lady Ling says she owes him a debt and this might be the best way for her to repay it. So they drink together for a while and then Ryam just goes to bed. On his way back to his room, he hears something moving around outside and goes to see what it is, and he finds Eiley practicing her swords again. He teases her that it's late, and Eiley asks him if Ling is the sort of woman he prefers, and Ryam says that Ling is the sort of woman who would tear a man apart and make him beg for more, and Eiley gets like super jealous, and he goes, "Oh, so you do like her." And Eiley says she'll show him her training, and she takes off the sash belt that she's wearing and ties it around his eyes. And she says that they train by touch, not by sight. It's like a really intimate sort of scene, but there's no actual sex in it. And she guides him through sword training, which is not a euphemism. He's blindfolded, and then he just stops all of a sudden. And she asks him why, and Ryam takes off the blindfold, and he's just like, "Do you know what you do to me?" Ryam is like, he knows he can't have her. She's a warrior general's daughter, basically. Instead, he just like completely ruins the mood by informing Eiley that Lady Ling will take her to the capital and he will be leaving and going his own way. Eiley is obviously very upset. She doesn't trust Lady Ling, even though Ryam insists that she is a friend, and he says that she needs to be accompanied into the city by somebody respectable, not a barbarian like him. He says he'll be leaving tomorrow, and Eiley says nothing after that. She leaves for her room and just leaves Ryam standing in the orchard, where he stays until the servants come to put out lanterns at the end of the night. The next morning, the servants are loading up Lady Ling's things into the litter, and Eiley is straight up just like not even talking to Ryam. She's pissed. Ryam goes to talk to Ling, and they say that they'll go together to the main road and then they'll go their separate ways from there. Lady Ling tells Ryam that he needs to go talk to Eiley, and when he does, he's met with nothing but like a cold shoulder. She doesn't trust Ling, and she hates that he's leaving her before they can get to Chang'an. Before anything else can happen, however, a servant comes running out of the woods and starts talking to Ling in Chinese. And then Ling turns to them and tells them that Li Tao has an entire army scouring the woods. There's no time, and they need to leave right now. They can take her horse, but they have to go. Ling says she's going to go to the temple and pray, and just make herself scarce, basically, and hope that Li Tao's army doesn't ransack and destroy her home while she's away. Eiley and Ryam both get on the horse, and they ride until the horse has to stop because, like, it's carrying two grown-ass adults at full speed, and it has not stopped. After giving it a few minutes to stop and rest, two soldiers actually come out of the woods and have found them. So Ryam pulls out his sword, and he cuts the first one down, like, immediately, and then the second one actually takes off running, and Ryam chases after him. Eileen grabs her swords and chases after Ryam, because there could be more soldiers in the woods, and she doesn't want him to get outnumbered and ambushed. They end up actually finding 5 more soldiers, and Ryam and Eileen kill a few of them, and she fights basically just as well as Ryam does, and honestly, I'm grateful for this. The whole point of this book is that she can defend herself if she wants to. It's kind of just like her sense of honor that's holding her back, and Ryam is not there to save her. I guess he's not there because she needs to be saved all the time, which is definitely the vibes I got from the last book that we read. One of the remaining scouts gets his hand on his whistle and he blows it, alerting the rest of the soldiers to the fact that they found Eileen. So Ryam and Eileen run. They head back towards the spring and get on the horse, but the horse is just fucking dead on its feet. It can't do it. They dismount not too long after, and they send the horse off running on its own, and they go in a different direction. While they're running through the woods, Eileen basically collapses, and Ryam realizes that at some point she's like sprained or hurt her ankle, and she can't do it anymore. She can't keep walking. He picks her up and throws her over his shoulder and just runs like that until they find a spot where it's safe enough to stop. When Ryam checks her ankle, he finds that it's swollen to about twice its size, and he tells her that she should have said something up till now. Eileen's on the verge of a freakout. She says she doesn't want him to think that she's weak and that she's a spoiled brat and she's just a child, like, because her older brothers were always calling her that. And Ryam says no, she's absolutely not a child. She fought against soldiers, and he says she was magnificent. This time, Eileen is the one who kisses him, and they are making out again. They always immediately go from kiss to make out. There's no little kisses here. Ryam is actually the one who pulls away and is like, you can't keep kissing me like that. Like, what do you want from me? That's not fair. Eileen's the one who's been insisting this whole time that he has to stay back. He can't touch her. And then she turns around and kisses him. And he's just like, tell me what you want, because I'll do it. I can't keep doing this. Eileen just tells him that she wants to go home. And that's it. That's it. So Ryam gets back, puts some distance between them, and they rest for the night. Ryam tells her that every man has his limits. I'm skipping a lot of the back and forth here because I feel like this write-up is getting long as it is. And I'm kind of trying to change up how I write my summary from this point on, because at this point I would read a few paragraphs, pause to write, and then I'd go back to reading, and then I'd pause to write every couple paragraphs, and it makes it really hard to actually get into the book. I'm going to try to read longer chunks and then write my summary, so details will be a little more loose, but I hope that this will still work anyway, because as it is right now, it takes me a long time to get through a 280 page book when I have to like read 3 paragraphs, stop to write, read 3 paragraphs, stop to write. At this point, I feel pretty bad for Ryam. It's not fair for Eileen to keep kissing him and then pulling away. Like, I understand she's conflicted, but it does get kind of tiring for me, like as a reader after a while. Like, they've been doing this whole book. When they come out of the forest, sometimes later, they come out to the main road, they find a wagon. Eileen goes to talk to the driver and actually just gets him a ride. It's really easy. Telling them that they'll protect the wagon if bandits should show up, as long as they can get a ride to Chang'an. The ride is easy, and Ryam gets to sleep for the first time since they left Lady Ling's manor. They're soon out of Li Tao's territory, and 2 days from the city when Ryam wakes up. They talk a little bit. Eileen insists that her father has mercy, but Ryam insists that she can't be seen with him when they enter the city. It would ruin her. They both regret that he will have to leave once he gets to Chang'an. They talk a bit about where she's from, and it comes out that Eileen's home is not too far away from Yumenguan, and that Ryam passes through when he returns to the mountains where his settlement is. She tells him that he should stop and talk to her brother, who would be hospitable, and Ryam says that her family must be high in the courts then, and Eileen just kind of completely ignores that subject altogether and starts asking Ryam about who he was before he came here instead, because she cannot let this go for some reason. He says his father trained soldiers, but ultimately died and left him his sword. That was all he had. Ryam was a wandering swordsman back home, and he used to fight for money and stuff like that, but he also met the man who claimed to be the bastard son of a king, and Eileen mentions that that's the man who Princess Mia abdicated and then ran off with. This kind of sounds like it's referencing another book that Jeannie Lin might have written, so I turned around to go through the list of books in the series. The series is called The Tang Dynasty, and there's like 5 books and a bunch of shorts, but I also see that the book 2 is about Lady Ling and another swordsman, so that's kind of awesome. I can't wait to read about her. Mia is apparently from an unpublished first novel that Jeannie Lin had written, so no, they don't have an official published story, which kind of sucks, but maybe they'll get around to it one day. Ailey and Ryam trade a few more stories and then ride peacefully the whole way into the city. Ryam helps unload the cart when they get to the market, and then he goes to find Ailey and he sees some guards approaching them. Ryam turns to run immediately, but Ailey doesn't follow, and she instead tells Ryam that that's her brother. So she's been reunited with her family. Ryam tells her to go, and Ailey asks him to meet up with her again tomorrow, and he says yes despite his best judgment, but then he slips away when Ailey goes to meet her brother. Ailey's brother takes her home, and she finds her mother, but her father is currently away. Her mother keeps asking her what happened, if her husband was abusive, but Ailey tells her that they never got married and nothing happened. Ailey tries to tell her mother what she's learned, but she's having none of it. She tells Ailey that she better explain to her father tomorrow and beg for forgiveness on her knees. The next morning, Ailey is dressed up, nice and proper, and goes out first thing in the morning to meet Ryam, where she said they would meet that next day. She gives him a big coin purse, tells him that a horse is waiting at the stables for him, and then she gives him a little kiss before they part ways. Ryam to return home, and Ailey to return to the palace. Ailey goes to meet with her father, and the narration explains that he was distant. He's always been distant, but more so now that he's the emperor. She was his 6th-born child, and for the most part, she stood by while he interacted with her mother and her brothers. Their interactions grew few and far between since he became the emperor, but Ailey tells him what she knows, that Li Tao is responsible for her brother's death, and that he had a shipment of weapons sent through Yumenguan. Her father knew about the weapons, and he insists that they honor their promises. She would have to marry Li Tao, and he and her mother were going to escort her back to him personally. When she returns to her room, Ailey is looking for her swords, and she finds out that her mother has taken them and put them back in the armory. Her mother insists that she will be happy with Li Tao, and Li Tao and her father have always been rivals, but they're not enemies. She mentions that she knows Ailey went to meet a man that morning and asks who it was. Ailey tells her that it was a man who had saved her and brought her home, and insists that he was honorable. Ailey's mother doesn't believe her and freaks out and wonders if she's been ruined and would dishonor her entire family by running off with a swordsman. Ailey insists that nothing happened, and her mother talks about the sacrifices they both have to make for the family. Ailey asks what sacrifices she means, and her mother says that the emperor, her father, plans on summoning Princess Mia back to the palace with the intent to marry her and make her the empress. So his current wife, Ailey's mother, would become second wife. Ailey is appalled and starts getting upset about that, and then her mother turns around and slaps her. Her mother says that if she can deal with that, then Ailey can deal with marrying Li Tao. Ailey goes to visit her grandmother, and they talk about what's happening. Her grandmother seems way more sensible, although she doesn't outright say anything. She teases Ailey about there being a boy, and Ailey says she would rather be disowned than marry Li Tao. Her grandmother calls her dramatic, and then when Ailey talks about how her father is planning on marrying Princess Mia, her grandmother says that he would see reason with a bit of time or a push in the right direction. Ailey's grandmother tells her about how when she was young, a rich man wanted to marry her, but making her his 3rd wife. So she declared that she would only marry the man who bested her in combat, and the rich old man declared her a mad woman, but then she had men lining up, trying to fight for her hand, fighting her in combat for her hand. Her grandmother says she finally met her partner when she liked how he treated her before combat, so she let him win. Ailey's grandmother asks her when the last time she visited her brother in her home province was, and Ailey points out that she won't be allowed to go anywhere after what she did. Ailey's grandmother reminds her that she is the Empress Mother now. She tells Ailey to bring the boy she met back to her one day because if he wants to have Ailey, he must beat her in combat. If her grandmother likes him, she will let him win. Ryam is in a tavern, days rides away from Chang'an, getting drunk as hell, and trying to forget Ailey, but he's not doing a very good job of it. Ailey is showed out of the palace by her grandmother, who gives her some money in the names of men who will help her get home. When she first arrives to town, she stables her horse, and she sees the one that she gave Ryam to ride still there. Stableman tells her that he's been in town drinking for days. Lee rushes to the drinking house to find him, and he's just like completely out of it. He's surprised to see her, and she says she thought she'd never see him again. They both crash together in kisses and practically fall down the stairs. They're making out. They're putting their hands all over each other. He yanks her into his room. They undress each other, and then Ryam is the one who stops everything because he's hella drunk. Lee was kind of the one who initiated this. He's the one who stops it because he's hella drunk. He doesn't want to have sex here in the dirty tavern when he's 3 sheets to the wind. Lee's sad. She goes to get up, but he's like, no. And then he shows her that you don't have to go all the way, if you know what I mean. They wake up in the morning, and Lee's pretty happy with herself, honestly, but Ryam has regrets because he shouldn't have let her stay here in this dirty inn. This is no place for lady. He asks her why she's here, where she's going, and she says she's returning home to the mountains, which is near Yumengguan, where Ryam is heading anyway, so he says he'll take her there. Lee says her father would know she's gone by now and he would send the entire Imperial army after her to get her back. Ryam asks how that's even possible, and Lee tells him the truth, that her father is the Emperor, so they need to leave. Fast. The home trip is uneventful, and she's there in a couple days. There's no conflict. Ryam notes that she lights up at the sight of her home, and Lee challenges him to a race. He asks her what he gets if he wins, and she doesn't answer, but she definitely gives him a look, and then takes off at full speed. Ryam wins the race, they kiss in the stables, and the footmen show up immediately and break up the whole thing quickly. She says Shen Lee is here and demands to know where her brother is from the soldiers who showed up. They tell her he's out on patrol, and he's not here right now, so Lee just takes Ryam and decides to show him around the house instead. They walk through the house, and she shows them around, but they don't really talk about anything that we haven't heard before. It's just the same old family stuff. They settle down for dinner. Ryam's struggling with his chopsticks. Lee admits she was super jealous of Ling, and Ryam tells her that she's 10 times prettier than Ling. They start talking about Yumengguan, and Lee asks about Princess Mia. She hasn't told Ryam yet that her father plans to bring her back to marry him. Mia has been married to Adrian, one of the barbarians, for a year now. After dinner, she shows them the courtyard where they would practice fighting swords when they were kids, and after a little bit of flirting, Ryam suggests she show him her former bedroom. Lee does. Things get kind of intense. And then Ryam tells her to ask him to leave, and if she does, he'll do it. But she doesn't. And this time, they actually bang. This is like 280 pages into a 360-page book, so I definitely would call this one a bit of a slow burn. The next morning, they're sparring and having fun when her brother shows up and he's pissed. Because he found her, like, play wrestling in the courtyard, like, actually wrestling with Ryam, when she's supposed to be married to Li Tao. She defends him, and in Chinese, she tells her brother that she loves this man. She hopes that Ryam can't understand what she's saying, but I'm pretty sure that he does. And her brother says that Ryam shamed her and tells him to draw his sword. Lee insists that Ryam doesn't understand, and then her brother tells him to draw his sword in Ryam's language, which I kind of have just assumed was English, but I don't know. Ryam says it'll be alright, and he draws his sword, and her brother charges at him. However, it turns out that this brother kind of sucks at sword fighting, and Ryam has no issues defending himself whatsoever. It was actually it says it was a challenge to make the fight look respectable, but Ryam knew that he somehow needed to. So he had to make it look like this guy was actually doing all right when he sucks. Lee begs him to stop, and Huang, her brother, insists that Ryam needs to die, or at very least get his ass kicked. But Ryam is entirely unfazed by her brother's sword fighting and just keeps deflecting the blows until the other guy wears himself out, basically. Ryam is like, thank you for taking it easy on me. And her brother is like, I guess this guy's a pretty good swordman or something. And then they both bow. Lee then turns around and punches her brother on the arm and tells him he should think before starting a fight. And Huang says he's not done with Ryam yet. The book then does a hard cut to Ryam and Huang having a drinking contest. There's 10 cups laid out and they're basically going down the line doing shots. and they've been doing it for like an hour now. Like, this is not the first row of drinks that they've done. Huang thanks Ryam for the show out there, meaning pretending that it was an even fight, even though Ryam was just letting him letting him win, basically. And then tells him it's not easy being a poet in a family of warriors, and that he's never really taken to the sword like the rest of his siblings have. Huang apologizes for insulting Ryam, and then asks if they should finish their row of drinks and then declare themselves brothers. Seems like Ryam's won him over, and it also helps that Aili and Huang were the closest, like, relationship between her and her siblings. Aili is pacing around outside the room, obviously, like, reflecting on the fact that she admitted to her brother that she loves Ryam, and Ryam comes out of the room and she notices that he's being kind of distant. She asks him what's wrong, and he says that her whole family cares about her. And Aili says not anymore, but not after what she did. And Ryam says that if her father finds him, he will literally kill him. Because, you know, he kind of intervened on that whole arranged marriage thing. Ryam doesn't say it out loud, but he's been having some thoughts about how he could have, like, really screwed up her life. She could be pregnant now, because they boned. And her family would never forgive her for that. Things are tense between him and Aili. He says he's gonna go out for a ride to clear his head, and he spends the rest of the day riding a horse through the mountains. When he returns, he goes to the room where he's been set up for the time being. Aili comes down to see him, and it's kind of hella awkward. She says she worried that he would actually just leave and not come back. And Ryam says he would never do that to her. But in his mind, he says that he was actually just considering heading back to Yumenguan. Aili climbs on top of him, and they bone, and then in the morning he wakes up alone. Huang is the one who knocks on his door and gets him out of bed, and Ryam is just glad that Aili snuck out in the morning, so her brother didn't find her there. Her brother is pale with dark circles under his eyes. He looks like something's wrong, or maybe he's just super hungover. Huang leads Ryam to a little altar and tells him he needs to plead to their ancestors and explain his intentions with Aili, and then they need to leave, because their father will kill him if they find him. Ryam says he can't do that, like he just is not comfortable with the idea of praying to their ancestors, I guess. And Aili, she confronts her brother, and he tells her that she's stubborn and that she's been blinded by love and it's changed her. He was trying to appease everybody, and he would try to speak on her behalf to her father to try to smooth things over. Aili says that her father has lost sight of who they are as a family, and her brother says that that's the barbarian's influence on her. Aili then declares that her father has no daughter. She basically just disowned her father, and then she runs off to go find Ryam. She heads to the stables because she assumes that he is leaving. He's gonna take off running. But he's not there. He's actually the one who finds her there. She tells him that she wants to leave and they're gonna go to Yumenguan. He asks if she's sure. She says yes, so he agrees because there's no stopping her once she puts her mind to something, and she goes to pack her things. A week later, they arrive at the fortress where the barbarians are staying. He's greeted by the barbarian prince, Adrian, who says that everyone just assumed that Ryam died. Ryam says he didn't die, but that everybody who was under his command did. But then Adrian turns around and goes, no, they didn't. They got here like a few weeks ago. Nobody knew where you went? So I guess nobody died? The whole weight, the emotional conflict that Ryam has been carrying this whole book just like didn't actually happen, I guess. He was knocked out and his whole crew disappeared, and I guess he never bothered to actually look for them or their bodies, and they never bothered to look for him. I don't know. That's a very fuzzy detail. That one's a bit of a stretch. Adrian is introduced to Aili, and he recognizes immediately that she is a princess, and then Mia comes out and they both recognize each other. Inside the fortress, Adrian explains that the crew had been held under imperial jurisdiction. Mia had been the one who actually intervened and had them released. 2 men had died, but that's way less than Ryam had thought, because he thought all 20 had died. Ryam and Adrian catch up, and Adrian explains that they're moving away, or they're looking at moving away from Yumenguan, and further away from the politics of Imperial China. It's not safe here for them, though it could be weeks or months before they actually gather everybody up to make that move. Adrian suggests that someone want to stay here because they have families, and that Ryam could stay here and be the one to lead them. Eileen and Mia are catching up elsewhere, and Mia asks what brings Eileen to this place. And Eileen ends up telling her everything about Li Tao and talks about how family doesn't matter to her father anymore. He doesn't care about her. He won't come looking for her. He just wants her to marry Li Tao. Mia insists that to Emperor Shen, family is everything. Mia says that she will write to her father to tell him that Eileen is safe at the very least. And Eileen tells Mia that her father was intending on actually bringing Mia back to be first wife. And Mia laughs and says that Eileen's mother would have never... Eileen's mother would have cut her heart out before she let that happen. And Eileen says that her mother was willing to go along with the plan. Mia insists that it won't happen, but that she'll put in a good word for Ryam. Eileen says that that's not going to help. He and her brothers will have Ryam's head, but Mia insists that Ryam helped fight alongside the rebellion that put Shen on the throne, so he's still got a chance. Ryam visits her that night, and Eileen tells him that she's leaving tomorrow. Suddenly, apparently. I'm not sure where this is coming from, but okay, they spent like a week on the road to get here, and she's leaving the next day. Eileen tells Ryam to come with her, and he says okay. He'll make sure she gets back safe. And Eileen says if he's coming and he's not gonna stay with her, she would prefer he didn't come at all. So Ryam is like, okay, fine. Ryam says she deserves someone who can give her what she needs, which is family honor and loyalty. And Eileen asks if he can give her what she wants. And he says no. Eileen asks if it's because he doesn't want to. And Ryam says yes, because he doesn't want to. He's lying, obviously. But he's saying he doesn't want to give her what she wants because he thinks that's best for her. Ryam leaves to go drink with Adrian, and Adrian tells Ryam that Mia is pregnant. They talk about how Ryam agreed to go with the scouting party to look for a new place to live. Adrian tells Ryam that he should be with Eileen, but Ryam insists otherwise. In the morning, Eileen leaves with Mia, who was sure that Ryam would have showed up this morning, but there's no sign of him. On the road as they're leaving, they see a large group of soldiers coming towards them, bearing Li Tao's insignia. His army has found her, apparently. Apparently they found her before the Imperial army did. They break into a fight, and a very long fight scene ensues, and Ryam is still nowhere to be seen, actually. Eileen fights with the head general of this little group, the squad, and she gets in a good hit. Like, I think she cuts him on the cheek. But he disarms her and throws her down. Eileen loses the fight, she gets swarmed by the guards, she gets bound up and carried away. Mia returns to the stronghold and tells the others that Eileen was captured. Ryam rushes off. He leaves on the fastest horses with a group of 15 men, and they ride through the night because they're a half day behind already. Her kidnappers stop, and they find a spot to rest, and close to dawn, Eileen awakens to the sound of hoofbeats. Ryam is leading a charge down to rescue her, and he is almost immediately defeated. He's tired. He's been riding for like a day and a half. No, non-stop. He hasn't eaten. He's like, he spent the whole night drinking before. He's fucked up. He immediately gets captured. He and 4 of his men, anyway, are captured. The rest are either killed or they take off running. They are taken to Li Tao's manor, just like that. The entire book has been a journey from Li Tao's manor to her home to Yumengguan, and they're from Yumengguan to Li Tao's manor on a page flip, which was a lot. It felt like it could have been more. So in the manor, she is taken away immediately, given a bath to clean up, and this is when she gets to meet Li Tao. Li Tao turns out to actually be the general she had fought, who had grabbed her, and who she cut on the face. He stole her swords and took them from her when he had her tied up and put in the cart. They have some back and forth, and Li Tao says that the sword shipments were his, but that he was not the one who killed her brother. Li Tao says that if he had, he wouldn't lie about it. He intends on marrying her, and he will kill Ryam for putting his hands on her. Eileen says that if he doesn't release her, she will kill him one day. He will wake up with a knife plunged into his heart. Maybe tomorrow, maybe 10 years, maybe 50 years from now, she will kill him. Li Tao leaves the room. The next day, Eileen is to be fitted for her wedding clothes, and instead of actually doing it, she just picks them up and throws them on the floor. She doesn't want to do it. She's going to wait for her father to get here instead. Li Tao takes Eileen out of the room where she's been staying, and out onto the balcony where she sees Ryam being dragged around by the soldiers, Li Tao's soldiers. He's been beaten and she accuses Li Tao of having him tortured, but he says no. Ryam has been fighting this entire time nonstop, and the soldiers the soldiers have been hurting him in self-defense because they cannot control Ryam. Li Tao says that if Ai Li marries him, they will release Ryam and his 4 soldiers. Ai Li says that she doesn't trust him, that he'll just have Ryam killed anyways, and Li Tao says that he doesn't like the idea of letting his wife's lover live. However, he knows that Ai Li would resent him forever if he did. So, if she marries him, he will let Ryam leave for realsies, and he'll also release all of his men. He promises. He has no reason to lie about it. He will do this because he doesn't want to die. Ai Li agrees to these terms. Li Tao is like, he's arrogant and he's confident and he really exudes this aura of like, I am so powerful, I don't even need to lie about my intentions. Like, girl, if I'd had your brother killed, I'd tell you because I don't have anything to hide, you know? He says that like he wants sons, he wants to marry a Shen, and he does not want to have to force his wife into bed with him. He does not want to wake up with a knife in his heart, and and he's willing to, I guess, negotiate with Ai Li by letting Ryam go if he could have these things. Honestly, he's kind of, you know, he's kind of hot though. I don't know. I'd consider it. He's described as having dark hair, graying temples. He's tall. He's got a scar on his cheek. He's got sharp features. He's super powerful. He's like a military general. Girl, consider this one. Li Tao tells Ai Li to go downstairs, and she tells Ryam that she's marrying Li Tao. They will let him go, but she's marrying Li Tao. Ryam starts yelling that he's not about to leave her here. He's not going anywhere. The Emperor arrives. Li Tao and Ai Li go down to greet them, and Ai Li and her father go for a walk together, and they talk about how pissed her mother is, how brothers are all worried about her. Her grandmother, like, blames herself for all this happening. He says that her mother is worried something she said made Ai Li run away, and Ai Li tells him no, it's not her mother that's the problem. It's him. He's the reason she ran away. With his plans to marry Mia and set their mother aside, with his plans to force her to marry Li Tao, her father asks if she wants to marry Li Tao, and she doesn't answer. She tells him that they were raised to have honor. He asks again if she wants to marry Li Tao, and Ai Li says she has promised her family and Li Tao, so she will do it. Ryam is taken out to the forest and released with his men, but he says he's not going. He sends his men back to Yumengguan and then turns around and heads right back into Li Tao's manor, where the wedding is actively happening. I don't know why they waited until the middle of the wedding to release him, but maybe not the best bit of foresight, but you know, whatever. Ryam declares when he busts into this wedding ceremony, and Ryam declares that he wants to duel Li Tao for Ai Li's freedom. Li Tao calls for his sword and accepts, saying that if this is how he has to end this entire situation, then so be it. Ryam says he has no sword, so Emperor Shen actually turns around and gives him his sword. They move to the back of the compound, and Ryam and Li Tao both, they have like this little back and forth where Ryam is like, you don't own her, and Li Tao is like, she pledged herself to me, like she promised. It seems like they're both kind of honest men about this whole thing. It doesn't seem like super underhanded or anything. Honestly, though, Li Tao. Ryam and Li Tao duel, and they're pretty much neck and neck. They're exchanging blows. I think they end up like rolling on the ground, punching each other at one point. But Ryam eventually wins. And with Ryam's sword to Li Tao's throat, the Emperor declares that he's the winner. Li Tao releases Ai Li from her promise. Like, he doesn't seem like a bad guy, though. He's honorable, I guess. He kept his promise. He's not gonna marry her because he lost. Anyway, I went to go look up if he comes back and he has his own book, because I am way more interested in him now. Although, actually, it's the next book. The next book is Lady Suyin Ling and Li Tao. So I'm probably gonna read that one. With all of that, with all that over, Ryam thanks the Emperor for lending him his sword, and then he turns around to tell Aili that he loves her. The Emperor is like, let's go for a walk, and he walks off with Ryam. Aili follows after them, trying to hear what they're talking about. Emperor Shen gives Ryam his sword that used to belong to his father, and tells him that Huang is coming to the city from their home in the mountains to help at court. So they will need somebody to live in the mountains to keep an eye on things there. Which is basically the Emperor is asking them to go back to the mountains where Aili was happier and set up there and basically run that area, which I assume will also be like, that'll also make a safe space for the barbarians of Yumengguan to stay, which kind of wraps everything up in a nice little bow. Aili comes up to Ryam and gives him a kiss on the cheek, or wherever she can find a spot that's not currently bruised. The epilogue is them riding to their home in the mountains. Ryam is learning about the country from the Emperor, and they're both happy. Ryam says this is the most at home he's ever been or felt. The end. Okay, so first things first. This was my favorite so far of all the books that I've read for this series. I know there's only 4 books in this series, but it was a relief. After the last 2 drained like all of my willpower, like we had Moon over Montana and then Zombie Moon, and then work got hectic and the hours were long, and then I had to stream I had to do, and then I just couldn't find the strength to sit down and really get the whole way through this book. Once I actually really started and kind of switched away once I actually started and kind of switched the way I was writing my summary partway through the book, it did become much easier for me to sit through and finish. This one kind of didn't feel like the traditional Harlequin in the same sense that the others have. It leaves me with some hope that I might find some gems in these stacks and stacks of books that I'm going through. Aili was a strong, capable heroine. I'm glad she didn't turn into a damsel in distress. She could hold her own in a sword fight against other men who were much larger than her. She gets herself out of her situations on her own. The entire story starts with her orchestrating her own kidnapping. It was a breath of fresh air, especially after the last 2 books. Especially over after Zombie Moon. Oof. Ryam was he was a little less interesting. He felt very flat. A lot of the time. He had a, tragic family backstory that they didn't talk about very much because he didn't want to talk about it. He's tall, he's blonde, he's blue-eyed, and he's just a beefy white guy. He's just boring. He didn't have much of a character other than the fact that he was in love with Aili throughout the entire story. At no point does he actually say where he's actually from, just that he came from another land. There were some funny jokes throughout the story that I appreciated. Huang, her elder brother, being shit at sword fighting, I thought was kind of funny. I think aside from the flatness of Ryam, I think my biggest issue was the plot began to rush and skip at the end. It seems to be an ongoing theme with these books in general, but I get that you only have like sub 300 pages to write an entire story, but the moment they got to her home in the mountains, everything just started to rush. They went to Yumengguan, they broke up, she went home, and she was captured, he was captured, the whole marriage ceremony, all of that happened in the span of about 30 pages. It had taken Ryam and Aili 2/3 of the book to go from Li Tao's manor to her home in the mountains, and then the rest of it feels like there was way more story happening and it got like nothing at all. She promises to marry Li Tao when there's only 50 pages left 15 pages left in the book. Ryam is freed, he challenges Li Tao, he wins, the Emperor approves, he and Aili go to the home in the mountains and live happily ever after in the span of like no time at all. It's page after page after page. Like, it's just too fast. I wish that maybe it had been evened out a little more. Honestly, though, I think the highlight of this book for me was Li Tao. He spent like the first, 250 pages of this book being a faceless villain, and then he shows up and you get the impression that he's like not as terrible as Eilee's been painting him. Like, he's cold, he's confident, he seems like he's got an attitude, he honors his promises. He tries to bargain with Eilee. He wants her to cooperate with him. He's willing to make deals, and he honors those deals if he loses. Um, he's not perfect, but I don't know. He was more interesting than Ryam, that's for sure. And you know, he was hot too. He's cold, but he gives the vibe that he could be cracked. So honestly, let me crack him. I spent 250 pages in this book following Eilee and Ryam, and then the entire thing got disrupted when he showed up basically at the end. That's the only thing I care about at this point. Maybe that's kind of why I felt like Ryam was so flat. Li Tao had more character in like the 5 pages where we knew him. But maybe I'm just telling on myself because I love the villains. All in all, I think I would give this book 4 stars. It was good. I liked it. I would recommend it to people if they were looking for something new. It's not a must read or else kind of book though. It was definitely missing something. It was definitely missing chemistry. It was missing, like, the final third of that book could have been a little bit longer, and then maybe the first third maybe a little bit shorter. I don't know. I am looking forward to the book with Lady Ling and Li Tao though. I'm more excited for that than anything in Butterfly Swords. I was thinking I would do a tier list of the books that I'm reading. I know there's only 4 of them, but I figured as we keep going, we'll keep adding to it. Okay, so here's the tier list for the current series. As you can see, there's not very much. I actually had to upload the title card so that I would have enough to fill out the the list. So first off, Zombie Moon, D tier. No questions. We'll put Second Chance of the Rebel. We're gonna put it in a B. Yeah, we're gonna put it in a B tier. Moon Over Montana, D. And then we'll put Butterfly Sword up in A tier. Okay, wait. Actually, we're gonna move this down. Okay, so Butterfly Swords, A tier. Second Chance of the Rebel, C. And then Zombie Moon and Moon Over Montana, both D tier. Bleh. As far as spiciness goes, it was alright. There was nothing like erroneous about this. It was a very slow burn, and the payoff wasn't super satisfying. Ryam is still a flat character. There was no chemistry really between the two of them. If you want to have a slow burn, like, they have to have chemistry. It has to be worth it. It has to be like worth the wait, but this really wasn't. The sex scenes weren't like bad though. They weren't offensive. At no point did it get called lovemaking, which annoys me every time it happens. Ryam initiated once, Eilee initiated once, so it was evenly split. He wasn't like a dominant dude or anything. She wasn't super passive. Overall, I guess like 3 stars spicy. Boom. 3 stars. Or three peppers. I guess for tropes, runaway bride, kind of. Eilee ran away from her wedding, but wasn't her wedding to Ryam or anything. Arranged marriage, I guess maybe was a little more fitting, but arranged marriage that she rejects. Maybe another trope would be like the lone wanderer, outcast, swordsman, hero, the Roroni. I don't know. He felt kind of cliche. Kind of weird that, like, I don't know. It's a book about the Tang Dynasty and the male main character was a white dude, but it is what it is. It definitely had like a bodyguard and his ward trope, because Ryam, obviously the bodyguard here, on a mission to get her home. Slow burn, technically a trope. That is the entire book. In conclusion, This one is the best one out of the books that I have read thus far. The bar, granted, is not very high. I do get the feeling that this might be one of the best ones I'm gonna get to read out of this pile, but we'll see. Thankfully, the next book in the series with Li Tao is also a Harlequin novel, so maybe I'll get that. We'll see. If not, maybe I'll pick that as like my hand-selected next book when I am done with these random wheel picks and I'm gonna lose my mind. We'll spin the wheel and find out what we're gonna be reading today, or for the next video anyway. Alright, so we got 139 entries in the wheel. Let's spin her. Please be something good. Please be something okay, at the very least. Nothing with a baby on the cover. Playing by the marriage rules. A marriage of convenience. Romance. Harlequin desire. Alright. So this is what the cover looks like. I can't actually show you what it looks like on Goodreads because Goodreads doesn't even have a cover on it. But, blurb says, the heir must marry by midnight to inherit it all. Will his ex say yes to his convenient proposal? Find out in this contemporary romance from Fiona Brand. A short-term marriage could solve all their problems, unless passion makes it all too real. Marry by midnight, that's the only way businessman and reformed playboy Damon Wyatt can secure his empire. When his convenient bride never arrives, he makes a marriage deal with a wedding planner, Jenna Beaumont, who also happens to be his way too tempting ex. If they play by the rules, their temporary arrangement will be over and done soon, but their undeniable attraction and very real connection break every last rule in the contract. Alright. That 3.4 stars out of 10, so we'll see, I guess. Alright. This video is probably going to be the longest one yet, considering the script was 25 pages. I'm sorry. However, if you made it this far, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It would really mean a lot to me if you could like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you've been thinking about these books, how you feel, if you have any suggestions or things I could do to improve it, you know, stuff like that. Every interaction helps with the algorithm, and I'm just so grateful if you happen to sit and watch this video. Thank you for hanging out with me today. Have a good night.